Well, I think we have to recognize that COVID-19 is going to affect our economy, not just public health. We'll have to make sure we have some contingencies there for public health, some contingencies for stimulus, businesses that are going to be affected. We take a look around the world. That needs to be there.
The Ontario government has announced it will table its latest budget on March 25th, 3 weeks from today. Under Premier Doug Ford, the province is on a bit of a fiscal diet, on track to balance the books, they say, by 2023. But is the government willing to sacrifice that plan in the wake of a viral outbreak that poses big risks to the economy? Rod Phillips is Ontario's finance minister. He joins us from Queen's Park in Toronto. Hi, Minister Phillips. Great to see you.
Hello, Vashi. Great to see you.
Your province's budget is now just 3 weeks away. As we said, how big of an effect do you think the coronavirus outbreak will have on it?
Well, you know, we are coming off the back of the biggest round of job creation in the history of the province last year, and the economy is strong in that regard. But of course, there's uncertainty out there in the world economy, and I think the coronavirus is a big part of that. So we're making plans. Right now, the major focus is making sure that our Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, has the resources, that the public officials have the resources that they need to make sure the preparations are being made and that they're working with the people that have been affected. So as always, we want to plan for every contingency, and we're monitoring closely the impacts on the economy. As you know, Bill Morneau, the federal finance minister, had a call with the provincial finance ministers today, and it was interesting. We sort of walked through the impacts coast to coast, and I think that was a good start as well, a good collaboration between federal and provincial levels, so that whatever the resources are that are required, we know that we'll be able to count on both provincial and the federal government.
When you talk about healthcare resources, does that mean that in the budget your government is prepared to increase resources for healthcare? We know there are plenty of stories out there about how hospitals are operating at or above capacity right now.
Yeah, so we're obviously will present our budget in 3 weeks, as you mentioned, on March 25th, and healthcare is a very important part of that budget. $64 billion of our roughly $160 billion budget, but we're going to make sure that there's resources, particularly as relates to this situation with public health. We have to put the health and safety of Ontarians first, and we'll be doing that.
If the economy is impacted in a negative way, we know it will be to a certain degree, but if it's largely negatively impacted and revenues take a hit in your province, will there be further spending cuts?
Well, you know, we are always planning for different contingencies. And as I said, we're actually coming off significant increases in revenue as a result of the policies that we put in place and the economic growth that we've seen, the job growth that we've seen. 74% of all the jobs created in Canada last year were created in Ontario. But as you'd expect, we plan for all the eventualities. We have to make sure that the resources are in place to support our public health workers, our broader health sector, our hospitals. And so, you know, we're monitoring that. Right now, Vashi, and I think this was the consensus across the country in the call this morning that Minister Morneau chaired. It's a bit early to see what the specific effects are going to be. Obviously, everybody's monitoring it, and it affects different provinces differently. But we'll keep a close eye on that and be sure that we're ready to respond if there's something required to support the economy.
I guess I'm asking for specific signals from you because you will know as well as any of our viewers what the discussion has been like since your last budget and the impact that the decisions you made there, many of which ended up being reversed, had on students, teachers, hospitals. There was a lot of concern about the direction your government was going in when it came to spending. And I'm just hoping for a clear message from you on what we can expect where spending is concerned in this budget. Are there going to be big cuts?
Well, the clear message since I took over as finance minister has been that we've increased spending, $1.9 billion more in healthcare, $1.2 billion more in education. So we're spending more than Government of Ontario ever has on both of those two vital areas, similarly on infrastructure. And I think Ontarians will expect us to continue to make sure we invest in those areas. But they also know that Ontario has the largest sub-sovereign debt in the world, $353 billion. So they also know that we need to to get the fiscal house in order. That's not just because that's the right thing to do, and as you said, we'll balance by 2023, but that's because that's the way you preserve and protect those important services in the long term. So we're balancing those two priorities, and that's what Ontarians will expect us to do, and that's what they'll see in the budget in 3 weeks.
I take your point when it comes to the fiscal situation and the cost of paying down that debt, certainly. But when you say, for example, that your government is still spending a lot on education, you use that figure $1.2 billion. It's not entirely accurate. Nearly half of that is accounted for because of increased spending on childcare. When you boil down all the numbers, and my colleague Mike Crawley did that, the amount of money extra that you're spending on schools is only $130 million. So it's not really accurate to say that you're investing more than any other government in this kind of thing.
Well, it is actually, because $1.2 billion is more than was ever spent before. And things like childcare, when you look at the way that kindergarten in a very progressive way is handled in our province, that childcare is provided in the schools. So we see this as all part of our focus on education. And I think that's
But it's not the same as saying you're investing in teachers and students and classrooms. It's not.
Well, I mean, our childcare, I mean, first of all, half of that money is going directly into classrooms and into teaching. And the part that's going into childcare is a very important of what we see as a comprehensive approach to education. So, you know, the education budget is the education budget, and the education budget went up by $1.2 billion. So that is accurate and that is true. And that does demonstrate our commitment to making sure that our students get the best support they can, because it's so important and because it's a priority for us and for Ontarians. Similarly on healthcare, $1.9 billion more there. But you know, we'll be obviously moving forward. That's last year, those record levels of spending, and next year we'll be looking at the investments that are required, looking at the situations from a public health perspective, looking what Ontarians need, and then making sure that we're doing in a fiscally responsible way. You know, when it comes to, and I just finished our consultations in advance of the budget, you know, Ontarians understand that we can't perpetually spend more money than we have coming in. They understand that we have to set our priorities right so that we can spend more money in those priority areas, and that's what we'll do.
They do, and I also recognize from consultations that I've read that your government conducted where education is concerned, they don't want bigger class sizes. They don't want mandatory e-learning. Your colleague, the education minister, rolled back your government's insistence on those two things in teacher negotiations, but not until yesterday, even though those consultations became public at the end of last year. How big of a problem are these negotiations for your government? Why haven't you been able to secure a deal?
Well, you know, we've been working constructively, and I think Mr. Lecce's been working constructively, listening to parents, but also listening at the bargaining table. And as you mentioned yesterday, made, I think, substantive moves to say that, you know, on the class size issue, we are, you know, really in agreement with what the teachers have been saying now, that we do think e-learning is part of the future, but we want to have parents make the choice around that. Again, we think that empowering parents to have that option makes sense. Our point to the teachers' unions was, you know, given that those moves have been made and given that that's what you said this is about, not compensation, why are you going on strike tomorrow? And so, you know, I think that we've shown a lot of goodwill in terms of that conversation, and we'd expect to see the teachers' unions. And listen, I talk to plenty of teachers, and as you'd expect, they don't like to be out on the picket lines either. But you have to ask the question, given those moves, why are the unions putting parents, putting children, frankly, putting their members, why are the union leaders putting them through that again when it looks like these issues should be able to be resolved at the bargaining table? And of course, we hope that we will.
Minister, with respect, I have to ask the question, why did it take so long for the government to make those announcements, to make those decisions, if in fact you could have made them earlier and prevented the strikes that have affected so many kids and parents in this province?
Well, if that's right, and it would have, then I guess we will have a deal tomorrow. Because if the position we're taking now, it means that the unions are agreeing that the issues around compensation. I mean, as you know, we've decided, because compensation is 50% of our provincial budget, and because the last government left us in such a difficult place, that we're limiting compensation to 1%. That we're going to be limiting growth in benefits somewhat. If those aren't issues, then Vashi, then I guess we will have a deal soon. And I think that's what parents want. That's certainly what kids want in school, and I believe that's what the majority of teachers want, and hopefully that's what we'll see, because now really the only difference is those issues of compensation.
All right, I'm out of time. I have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Minister Phillips. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you, Vashi.
Ontario's Finance Minister Rod Phillips from Queen's Park. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.